The rhythmic clatter of porcelain and the hiss of industrial steam filled the humid air of the restaurant's dishwashing pit. Elliot moved with a quiet, tireless efficiency, his hands weathered by decades of hot water and harsh detergents. To the elite culinary team in their pristine white coats, Elliot was just a ghost in a damp apron, a man whose only purpose was to ensure their plates were spotless for the next masterpiece. None of them knew that the man scrubbing burnt pans had once been the executive chef of a world-renowned establishment, a culinary pioneer whose recipes were studied in the finest academies. After a personal tragedy left him hollow, Elliot had walked away from the flashing cameras and the pressure of the stars, finding a strange solace in the repetitive, mindless labor of the scullery. He enjoyed the anonymity, watching the chaotic ego of the kitchen from the outside, content to let the world believe he was nothing more than a simple laborer who knew nothing of the art he served. Julian, the young and temperamental head chef, viewed his kitchen as a battlefield where he was the absolute monarch. He was obsessed with modern aesthetics and expensive gadgets, often sacrificing flavor for the sake of a perfect photograph. One busy Friday evening, as the pressure of a full house began to mount, Julian noticed Elliot carefully smelling a reduction that had been left simmering on a side stove. Feeling a surge of elitist arrogance, Julian marched over and swiped the spoon out of the old man's hand. "Why are you touching the food, Elliot? Your job is to make sure the trash is out and the floor is dry." Julian sneered, his voice cutting through the noise of the kitchen. "Stick to the suds and the sponges. You don't have the palate or the intellect to understand what we create here. You're just a relic who's lucky I haven't replaced you with a machine yet." Elliot didn't offer a word of defense. He simply lowered his head and returned to his sink, his silence a shield against the young man's biting cruelty. The night took a dramatic turn when a surprise guest arrived. The world's most feared food critic, a man known for closing restaurants with a single stroke of his pen. The kitchen fell into a state of paralyzed panic. Julian, desperate to impress, decided to prepare his most complex signature dish, but in his nerves, he made a fatal error. The delicate emulsion split, and the main sauce, the heart of the meal, was scorched beyond repair. With only minutes left before the dish had to be served, Julian stood frozen, staring at the ruined pan as his assistants scrambled in ineffective circles. The reputation of the restaurant, and Julian's soaring career, were seconds away from a humiliating collapse. From the shadows of the washing station, Elliot watched the disaster unfold with the calm eye of a veteran who had faced 1,000 such storms. He knew exactly how to save the sauce with a simple, forgotten technique, but he waited to see if the young king would finally ask for help. As the waiter returned to the kitchen with a frantic look, announcing the critic was growing impatient, Julian's arrogance finally shattered. He looked at the ruined sauce and then at his trembling hands. Elliot stepped forward, shedding his damp apron to reveal a clean, white shirt underneath. He didn't wait for an invitation. He picked up a fresh copper pan and began to work with a speed and grace that made the other cooks stop in their tracks. He didn't use the fancy sensors or the liquid nitrogen. He used his senses. He balanced the acidity with a pinch of a rare spice he kept in his pocket and whisked the sauce into a velvet-smooth masterpiece using a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the heartbeat of the kitchen. Julian watched in stunned silence as the illiterate old man transformed a pile of ruined ingredients into a work of culinary genius. The dish was plated and sent out, leaving the kitchen in a heavy, contemplative silence. The critic didn't just finish the meal. He requested to meet the chef who had prepared the sauce. Julian, pale and shaking, walked out to the dining room, but he found he couldn't take credit for a miracle he hadn't performed. To the shock of the patrons, Julian gestured for Elliot to join him. When the critic saw Elliot, his eyes widened in recognition. "Chef Elliot, is it truly you?" The critic gasped, standing up in respect. "I haven't tasted this perfection since you disappeared from the scene 10 years ago. Why are you in a scullery?" The news that a legendary master had been washing dishes in secret sent a shockwave through the room. Julian stood in the shadows, the realization of his own ignorance and cruelty weighing on him like a mountain of lead. He had spent months mocking a man who was, in reality, the greatest mentor he could have ever hoped for, a man whose shadow he wasn't even fit to stand in. The aftermath of the revelation was a total transformation of the restaurant's culture. The owner offered Elliot the position of executive director with a salary that would make Julian's look like pocket change. However, Elliot accepted the role on one condition. He would stay in the kitchen not as a boss, but as a teacher. He didn't want the fame or the title. He wanted to restore the soul of the craft. Julian was not fired, but he was humbled. He became Elliot's first student, trading his ego for a notebook. He found himself at the dishwashing station for an hour every day, a task Elliot insisted upon to teach him that no job is beneath a true master. The arrogance was replaced by a deep, genuine respect for the ingredients and the people who handled them. Under Elliot's quiet guidance, Julian finally began to understand that a great chef is defined not by the stars on their wall, but by the humility in their heart. The restaurant soon became the most respected establishment in the region, known for food that carried a profound emotional depth. Elliot remained the same modest man, often found in the back sharing a simple meal with the newest staff members. He and Julian formed a bond that transcended the typical hierarchy of a kitchen. Julian realized that Elliot hadn't just saved the sauce that night. He had saved Julian from becoming a man consumed by his own vanity. The kitchen was no longer a battlefield, but a sanctuary of learning where the wisdom of the past was used to build the innovations of the future. Elliot found that by sharing his knowledge, he had finally found a way to heal the grief that had once driven him into hiding. He was no longer a ghost in a damp apron. He was the heartbeat of a community that finally understood the true meaning of service. As the years passed, the legend of the master of the scullery became a part of the world's culinary lore. Elliot eventually retired to a small cottage with a beautiful garden, but his influence remained in every dish that left the kitchen. Julian eventually took over as the head chef, but he never forgot the lesson he learned at the sink. He kept Elliot's old, worn dishwashing sponge in a glass case in his office as a reminder of where he came from and the man who had shown him the light. He taught his own students that the most important ingredient in any recipe is respect. Respect for the food, respect for the tradition, and respect for every person in the room, regardless of their rank. The restaurant remained a beacon of excellence, proving that the greatest treasures are often hidden in the most unassuming places, waiting for a moment of crisis to reveal their brilliance. The final scene of the story finds an elderly Julian standing in his busy kitchen, watching a young, arrogant cook belittle a new assistant. Julian doesn't shout. He simply walks over and tells the story of the old man who once saved a restaurant with a copper pan and a silent heart. He shows the young cook the glass case in his office, and the air in the kitchen shifts as the weight of the story sinks in. Julian realizes that his greatest achievement wasn't the awards he had won, but the fact that he was continuing Elliot's legacy of kindness. The kitchen remains a place of warmth and excellence, a testament to the fact that the true masters are those who lead with love. As the sun sets over the city, Julian picks up a towel and helps the new assistant dry a stack of plates, a small smile of contentment on his face as he remembers the man who changed his life. The story of Elliot and Julian serves as a timeless reminder that every person we meet has a depth we cannot see and a story we do not know. It proves that humility is not a weakness, but the ultimate strength of a refined soul. In a world that often prizes the loud and the flashy, it is the silent heroes who provide the foundation for everything beautiful. Elliot found his peace not in the applause of the crowd, but in the knowledge that he had passed on his fire to a new generation. The copper pan he used that night became a symbol of a new era in cooking, one where the heart is the head chef and the soul is the secret ingredient. And so, in that quiet corner of the world, the legacy of the hidden hero lived on, ensuring that no one in that kitchen would ever be invisible or undervalued again.